We are now learning that Ukraine has successfully hit an ammunition depot deep inside Russia using 8 long-range U.S. missiles. That is what 2 defense U.S. officials are telling our Oren Lieberman tonight. Russia claims the Ukrainian attack did not cause damage. The U.S. says that is false. But the Ukraine also reportedly used British-made Storm Shadow missiles for the first time today inside Russia as well.
Whoa.
Hear them. Heard them right there in that video. You see the background, but you can hear the explosions. The weapons expert telling CNN those are exactly the types of sounds and blasts you would expect to hear from those Storm Shadow missiles. It comes as Russia is now mass producing nuclear-resistant mobile bomb shelters. The shelters can protect against shockwaves and radiation from a nuclear blast, among other threats. While on Russian state TV, one popular host suggesting that the world is now on the verge of another world war.
As President Putin has repeatedly stressed, missile strikes deep inside Russian territory will change the nature of the conflict, its very essence, and be a radical escalation. After all, the USA, England, and France will be directly entering a war with Russia, with all the ensuing consequences for their own territories.
This comes as a number of American allies are now accusing Russia of sabotaging crucial fiber optic internet cables in the Baltic Sea. The cables connecting Sweden to Lithuania and Germany to Finland were cut on Sunday and Monday. And we are now learning that around the time that this happened, that a Chinese ship sailing from Russia was in that area. Nick Payton-Walsh is out front tonight in Kyiv.
Ukrainian special forces fighting up close and taking prisoners. Rare footage of them still inside Russia's Kursk region, where British Storm Shadow missiles were claimed to have hit Wednesday, these fragments found by locals. Just hours earlier, American-supplied ATACMS missiles also ploughed into Russia, marking a stark new escalation in the war. Yet it was also in Kiev that fear grew, the US Embassy closing here for the first time since the invasion, citing a threat of air attack.
It's a reflection of the heightened tension here felt in the capital Kiev. It's been under regular bombardment for over 2 months, but other European allied embassies are also limiting their function today. Perhaps a sense across NATO here that we're entering a new chapter of this conflict.
As Kiev braced for another sleepless night of sirens, the bereaved planted flags into this sea of loss in central Kiev. Anya's father died of his injuries 3 weeks ago after 5 months in a coma. She is raw from both the talk of peace and fear of sirens.
Так страшно, як сьогодні тут. Я вам скажу чесно, ми сьогодні під кожну тривогу ходили в укриття, бо було дійсно дуже страшно. Не хочеться якось завдавати шкоди нашій країні. Хочеться просто, щоб все було як було раніше, але без російського миру, без всього цього. Тобто
But it's never over in Kiev. The air raids intensifying in the past 2 months, and the weekends seen here the worst for a while. So the heightened anxiety behind several NATO embassies reducing operations this day sparks Ukrainian officials to plead they hold their nerve and deride this piece of Russian misinformation online, a detailed and fake warning of wide-scale attacks. This situation should be interpreted, he says, as Russia's attempt to use any elements of psychological influence. They have one instrument, which is to scare. This has always been a classic element of Russian politics, so I'd like our partners to be more careful as to the information coming from Russia.
What we saw today with that very explicit, specific US embassy closure and warning is a reflection, I think, of the fear of escalation around Ukraine. The misinformation the Russians are blamed for by Ukrainian officials, well, it was a fake, pretty bad fake, frankly. Is that the only thing that caused this US embassy warning? I doubt it, personally, and I think it feeds into a fear here, as I say, of a new chapter. US-made, UK-made missiles being fired by Ukraine into Russia. That's something that Vladimir Putin is probably going to want to respond to, and certainly Kiev is on edge because of that, Erin.
All right, Nick, thank you very much. And I want to go out front now to Evelyn Farkas, the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia and Ukraine, along with the retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, former Commanding General of the U.S. Army in Europe. So, Evelyn, these missiles that we heard the storm shadows right in that audio clip, but also now the U.S. ATACMS being used deep inside Russia on that ammo depot, as we understand in the most recent use. How does this tangibly change things? Does it tangibly accomplish anything right now for Ukraine?
Well, I think, Aaron, it puts pressure on the Russian government because the more of these ammunition depots that the Ukrainians can take out, that obviously means that they have less munitions, which means their time is shorter. The other thing is that it disrupts their logistics operations, and that also provides in the short term an advantage to the Ukrainians. So it may not be a deal changer just to take out one or two ammunition depots, but it's certainly disruptive on the battlefield right now in the short term.
General Hodges, Russia State TV talking about World War III, Putin making comments about nuclear weapons, and now they're sort of mass producing these mobile nuclear resistant bomb shelters, right, that we have video of. What do you see here? What do you think such a thing is about?
Well, I think this is classic Kremlin scaremongering. I mean, I have to give them credit for the new thing of the new bunkers that they'll be selling. The Russians know that Washington and Berlin and London and other capitals react to this, that we're vulnerable to this scaremongering. But if you think about it, why would Russia use a nuclear weapon? I mean, there is no benefit for Russia to use a nuclear weapon, none. Their benefit comes from the way we deter ourselves out of fear that they might use a nuclear weapon. China, India have both told Russia, do not use a nuclear weapon. The United States has said you will suffer catastrophic consequences if you use a nuclear weapon. So there's no benefit on the ground or strategically for Russia. So, of course, you take it serious because they have thousands. They don't care how many people they kill, including their own. But there are only downsides for Russia if they actually do it.
Evelyn, it comes as at least some sort of a pressure campaign appears to be on Europe to turn on this war, if not just simply a more broader escalation or Putin making it clear, that he wants to extend Russian dominance. I mentioned earlier those two undersea cables that were mysteriously cut. The German defense minister says that nobody believes they were accidentally severed. And then you had that Chinese ship with apparently a Russian captain, which was, seen in the area around the time that this occurred. What do you think happened?
Well, it seems likely, Aaron, that the Chinese ship did this at the behest of the Russian government. Whether the Chinese government was involved or not, I can't say. But this is a continuation. I just came back from Ukraine just before our elections. In the fall and in the summer, Russia was conducting sabotage operations all over Europe. The German intelligence agency heads were warning that the Russians were conducting these operations, that Russia was getting ready for some sort of operation potentially against NATO allies. So they were raising the sirens. We weren't paying that much attention to it. So the sabotage operations are part of this overall campaign to intimidate.
General Hodges.
Yes.
Oh, about the cables. What do you think that was Putin?
I'm sorry. Yeah, of course. The Russians are at war with us, even if we don't think of ourselves being at war with them in the traditional sense. We used to use this phrase hybrid war, which is really unhelpful and unuseful. The Russians are at war with us, whether it's disinformation, missiles flying through Polish airspace, Latvian airspace, Romanian airspace, sabotage. I'm glad my friend Evelyn used the word sabotage. That's what's going on all over Europe. They're pushing us to find out where our limits are. And so until we finally change our mindset and acknowledge that the Russians are at war, not armed attacks, so not Article 5 stuff, but they are at war. Until we inflict some kind of pain on them, their behavior is never going to change. And so we have to get serious about economic sanctions and helping Ukraine defeat Russia.
And we'll see what happens here, of course, at least what the incoming president has indicated, right, is a negotiated settlement, possible end to all those sanctions and a complete about-face on all of this. But let's see. All right, thank you both very much. I appreciate it.